Thank you guys for joining us today for this interview. Today I have Chris Eaton with me here. Chris has been teaching since 1977. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah.
And his first year. And he has been at Moody with us for about 5 years and in the online self-paced environment during that time. And he's had fantastic results in his student survey scores as well as his IQ scores. So he's had a really strong experience in the environment. And we're excited to be able to include Chris on this conversation about how we can create a strong instructional presence in the online self-paced environment. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about what do you enjoy about the online self-paced classroom?
Well, one thing, Lydia, I've had the opportunity to teach both the 8-week course format and this. And as I've gotten into it, I think probably the thing that I like most is the relaxed pace, which you can generate in a regular classroom too, except you do have a lot of material to cover and a very tight schedule in which to cover it. Whereas with the online self-paced format, unlike the old self-paced format, which was up to 6 months for some students, this one has to be completed within the 16-week semester length to meet federal requirements for student aid, but it still allows the student to have up to, well, technically, if they did each lesson every other week, they'd have 2 weeks to complete a lesson, which is more than plenty of time.
Wonderful. From the perspective of the instructor, so there are the benefits of the flexibility. What are some of the challenges that come in with the online self-paced environment?
Some of the challenges are whenever you're dealing with a course that is asynchronous, meaning that everybody's at a different spot in the curriculum at different times. And so consequently, for example, I still do my weekly announcements based on the 8-week or the 8 lessons. And I will deal with one particular lesson every 2 weeks, although I have to allude to the other lessons either later or back based on the students who are not yet completing them. So that gets to be a little tricky. And working with students who have such a variety of situations. I have on-campus students who are taking an online course just for a break, or I have some students who've actually left the main campus in order to take the rest of their courses online. Then I have students who are in full-time ministry, different places. I've had a number of students this past 2 semesters who have been still with Moody, but involved in internships. And that takes a lot of time. In fact, most of the students that I've dealt with have not really fully been able to estimate just how much time that internship requires. And consequently, they've run into problems with completing all their assignments. And so I've had to get online with a few of them and sit down and say, well, let me give you some ideas of how you can schedule your time, because I know internships sometimes are just 24/7. Those are some of the things I think that are challenges. The other is communicating effectively with the students. With the 8-week format, there's a regular discussion board, and that lends itself to a regular weekly contact with each student. With the self-paced format as it's structured now, the instructor really has to make a powerful effort to try to get a personal message to each student as often as possible. And because it is asynchronous, a lot of the students are not checking their email every day or every other day. So that presents a problem.
So keeping people engaged in the course tends to be a challenge.
Yes. Yeah.
How have you found what ways have you found to be able to address some of those challenges?
One of the most effective ways that I've been able to is by setting up an impromptu discussion post. It's informal in the fact that there are only positive points. Nobody can get dinged for anything. But it's a way of doing, in some ways, extra credit without having to actually set up a formal additional grade format in the grade book and through the course. Rather, I can do it informally and then just set up a section in one of the community posts where people can just stop in, they can read the question or read the issue to discuss and pop a real quick response to it. And then I can go in and see if anybody's responded, and then I can respond back to them. But that's even still, it's not as effective as that personal one-on-one contact each week.
So the announcements are the piece that you feel like help drive that, or do you contact students individually?
The announcements are really important, and getting students to be consistent and checking once a week at least to be able to read the announcements, because that's key information. And but the one-to-one emails, the individual emails, are really important. And I still have students. I have a student that responded to me today, but the last email I sent emails every week for the last 4 weeks to him, but he doesn't have internet at home, and so that was a little bit of a problem. But just keeping at it, I think, and in a real pinch, I try to set up at the very beginning of the course to let students know that if I need to, if they don't have any objections, I'll contact them by phone or by FaceTime or Skype, and that is another way to do it. But the email is the communication tool that's the most widely used.
That makes sense. Given that the students tend to be disengaged from the learning process, how do you keep yourself motivated to be engaged? Relationships are two ways. So if you don't have somebody else showing up, how do you feel like you're able to keep yourself motivated and engaged?
Well, one of the things that I've taken to doing this past year is trying to find regular articles in scholarly journals that are well written and are well reasoned. And reading and keeping up, especially with our life science and our physical science courses. I'm involved right now with the team that's rewriting and revising both of those courses. Because the textbook is out of date, and so that's one thing that for me is actually it's a labor of love, because I get a chance to find the latest research and information that's available, and post that for the students to be able to read if they choose to do so, and get an updated view of what the textbook's been telling them. And a lot of times there's been some major developments that have changed the whole outlook on given issues.
How fun. So it sounds like a lot of your continuing education pieces are what help keep you engaged in the learning process.
Yes.
What is your perception of how your engagement in the classroom impacts the students' behaviors?
I think one of the things that we do, and this is one thing I think Moody, both on campus and online, is very good at. We have to be the heavy at times. We have to help the students. You can't. You can never sit and beat somebody over the head with a baseball bat into the kingdom of God, or into their education. But we have to find ways to impress the importance on them of taking the learning seriously. And I think that's one thing I've noticed. A few students, it hasn't been too many, but a few in the self-paced venue especially, tend to take it as sort of a knockoff class. They're going to be fairly easy. Oh, good, this is an easy A. I can breeze through this one. And when they find out, number one, that they have to do some work and some study to really gather that information, it kind of takes a little wind out of their sails. And so I think that's one thing that the instructors at Moody are pretty good at. Some have to learn it, but we have to set up mechanisms that will help the student to see how serious their study is. But also, one of the things I have to do sometimes is in my weekly announcements is lay out a brief outline of ways to organize their time, how to organize their time through the week. Because a lot of the students aren't real good at that. They get in and they start off gung ho, and um, they won't get anything done after the third or fourth week. And then all of a sudden, week 15 comes up or week 16, and they just panic. So those are some of the behaviors I think that we really have to key in on and help to keep students on track with.
Yeah, that makes sense. In if they're struggling with engagement in the course, do you feel like some of your announcements or the personal contact, do you see the result of those to draw them back in and to help?
In most cases, I do. I've had students, especially if I've had students who've had a sudden family emergency come up. I've had in one case a student, her father he was in his late 80s, and she was working very hard to try to get through the assignments. But about the fourth or fifth week, I noticed that things started slowing down,
Mm.
and I emailed and emailed. Finally, I sent an email through. Oh gosh, I can't think what it was. One where it comes up. Oh, it was an instant message. That's what I used. And I asked her. I said, "Are you okay? Because this is not your normal demeanor. You seem like you're really stressed. Can you give me some clues?" Well, then she told me her dad had had a major stroke, and she was just dumbfounded. She didn't know what to do. She was stuck at work, and she had to finish the class. And at that time, she was taking both my physical science and life science classes. So I suggested, because it was early enough in the course, I think by the time this all came about, it was like the seventh or eighth week. I said, listen, why don't you write in for a withdrawal? I will go ahead and give you a withdrawal with the no fail, and then plan to come back and take the course. And I said, I'll let you just keep your assignments since you've done so well on them, and you can just resubmit those when you take it again, and then we'll pick up from there. But finish the course later when you've had a chance to deal with the things you did. And she had never thought that she could do that, but we worked it through with the academic records department, and she, I forget where it was. She had to fly clear across the country to wherever her father was. Anyway, that's a good example of keeping close to contact, and we do that sometimes. It's not the rule, fortunately, but keeping that personal contact as much as possible is really critical.
Yeah, it seems like it seems to be a theme in what you're talking about with reaching out to them to pull them in, reaching out to know what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in their life because they are human and have just as much of a life going on as we do.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. When it comes to your announcement pieces that you do to like draw them into the learning process, how often do you post your announcements for your students? What does that look like?
Um, I always have an announcement. I try to, sometimes I get them out on Mondays, but I try to make sure I have it by no later than Tuesday night. A couple of times I've been out of town or been someplace where I didn't have any kind of internet signal, so I had to do it on a Wednesday, or even, the latest I did was a Thursday one time. But I try to get at least the main announcement out on Tuesday, and I try to have a theme for the week, reminder of what lesson, if they're following the 2 week plan that Moody suggests, that's where they should be about then, and a little summary of the lesson itself, what it covers, and try to tie that directly into how it relates to Scripture. Um, then any announcements about important dates, anything coming up, um, uh, especially as it gets toward the end of the course, working on the term paper, or for the physical science class, we're getting the 2 science talks that are done in lieu of a regular formal paper. I will try to include a reference to either some section of scripture that really spoke to me for that week, or uh, a reference to a particular article or something that I came across that I thought was really important or really valuable for him to just take a moment to read through. And then I try to have some word of encouragement every Tuesday. And then midway through the week, I'll try to get a note out, like I'm going to try to do another one either tonight or tomorrow morning. And I try to put it in such a form as to be not so much as of course information as it is about encouragement. Sometimes I do a brief devotional, but something to encourage them to take stock of where they are in that point in the week and to keep moving. And also to remind them, please don't let yourself dig into a hole. When you feel pressure coming on, or you suddenly wake up and realize it's the next to last day of the course, please contact me right away. Don't hesitate. Don't sit there and dig a deeper hole. Talk to me. And that it usually does work. I usually get quite a bit of response.
Wonderful. So it sounds like you almost have 2 connection points. You have the weekly announcement that goes out at the beginning of Moody's school week, and then something that goes out additionally later in the week.
Right. Try to.
And that it sounds like you're doing more spiritual formation as well with doing devotionals and pieces like that.
It's part of it, Lydia, is since there isn't a formal lecture, there isn't a formal instructional time where I'm actually laying out the information for them or outlining what they're going to be learning. You have to do it through the announcements or through the emails, or I do videos too. I've found that the videos, I'm still experimenting with several different format programs. I've already purchased a couple of them, but trying to figure out which one works the best for doing a quick video. I'm afraid they're terribly boring because I don't have borders or dancing penguins coming across the bottom of the screen or anything like that. But we're working there. We're working on different ways to present the class and keep students engaged and connected.
I think that's good. Trying new things, being creative. Those are good. How do you feel like your online self-paced announcements differ from like any 8-week course announcements that you might do? Or what's similar, I guess?
Well, they're actually pretty similar. The main difference is with my 8-week courses, I could get on and the first thing right off the bat, this week, here's the unit we're studying, da-da-da-da-da-da. This is a summary of the lesson material. I'll have more later for you in the week. And the discussion question you'll be responding to this week is, and please be sure to get online but wait till after you've read through the material to try to respond to this. That's pretty much the gist of the announcements each week because it was fairly regular. And the 8-week courses, it's like a good 10K run. You get going and boy, you don't stop. But it works. Now the self-paced though, the students that take the self-paced courses often have a very good reason for it. And usually that reason involves their schedule. It works out better and they need more time to get things accomplished. So
that makes sense. Have you found that students have difficulty with the announcement structured in a way that it is, I guess, kind of synchronous for the way you'd move through the lessons, just because the learning is asynchronous? How does that work for your students?
Each week with the self-paced course, I have to gauge approximately where, if I were taking the course, where would I be? And here's the unit you should be on this week, but I might be back here, so I'll make reference to some of the information from a previous lesson, but then I'll also maybe give a view to what to expect, what's up ahead with the next lesson or two, because some of the students may be up there already. And that's the part. It's a guessing game to try to hit a little something for everybody along the way. And you can pretty well tell where students are. If I go in and I look at the grade book and I see where their assignments are, then I can kind of gauge a little bit from that. Uh, but it's a guessing game. you know, you might be here, somewhere along this spectrum. And just in case you are, so that part, that yeah, it's kind of like juggling while you're keeping a set of plates going on those balance sticks, and every now and then you stop and you twirl the plates, and then you go back to keeping the balls, and it's never a dull moment. Let's say that.
Does sound exciting, but it sounds like casting a wide net is what helps you kind of be able to touch bases with everybody depending on where they're at.
Yeah.
But shifting gears here a little bit, stepping away from announcements and talking about grading practices, how do you feel like that affects student engagement?
What's that?
Your grading
practices?
Yeah.
I tend to be with these courses a little more lenient than I would be normally in a regular classroom. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not. They still have to fulfill the requirements, but I tend to give students the benefit of a doubt a lot more, particularly when I'm not there to see what are the conditions they're working in. I had one student who was over in North Africa, and she was on a internship with one of the mission teams. And it was, she was trying to learn some of the language. I think it was in, oh golly, former French colony. I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, but she only had good internet access for about 2 hours a day. And it was at a certain period of time in the night. And she was, her schedule required her basically, she was up from about 5:30 in the morning until midnight. And it was really stretching her, and there were several things that were going on with the internship, and so I had to make some allowances because she was really conscientious. And so one of the things that I did was I knew she would have 3 weeks before the end of the course when she got back. So what I did was I worked with her on setting up a schedule whereby she did certain parts of the lessons, like the lesson guides, which are comprehensive questions. So you can work on those because you can almost do those in your sleep, because it's, here's the question, what's the answer? And it's directly out of the reading. And I've gone through and I've taught students in the past ways to look for keywords in the reading, because the questions are structured to mirror what you're reading. But also, I told her, set your course goals so that you'll get these done while you're there, and then in the last 3 weeks when you come back, yeah, it'll be kind of tough. You're going to have jet lag forever, but if you set a goal to complete these things after you get home, you'll probably find it's easier to do and easier for you to concentrate. And she was a little reluctant to do it because she was afraid she'd wind up short at the end of the semester. And I said, listen, if we are in a real pinch, you can always apply for an extension. And I said, I don't like to have students do that because it's more work for me. However, if that's what works, that's what we'll do. So you just know you've got some nets under you that you're not going to fall. And she was okay with that. Other students I've had who have a difficulty with writing, they're not real good at it. And one of the hardest things for me to get them to do is to have another person proofread their work for them every time. It almost takes an act of God to get them to do that. But that's another thing that I do with my grading, is I will include effort. Kind of, it's a background grade, but I can tell which students are really putting out the effort and which ones are just trying to get by. And so my grading practices sometimes are misinterpreted because we're doing it through email and that kind of thing. It's like letter writing with someone. You can't read a person's emotions. You can't see their body language or their face through a letter. Well, you can't do the same thing with email. So it does affect it. But I try to then just go the extra mile with explaining what I'm doing and making sure that I don't leave a student until I'm sure that they are clearly understanding what's being done.
Wonderful. Does the amount of feedback you offer in your grading affect their engagement or their success in the course?
It does, especially because I put with Microsoft Word, I use the comments function, but then I also at the bottom include a full summary uh, statement about their work, and then I use a rubric that I put together in Excel that's a straight score,
Mm-hmm.
18 points per written assignment, and it's based off of the criteria for the writing assignments, so it's fairly comprehensive too. But one thing I do, especially with the students that I know I can see are giving the effort, is I'll bend over and say, hey, if you want to take this assignment and revise it for a little better grade, go right ahead and do it, and I'll go in and I can change your grade. And they're surprised. You do that? Yes. Yeah. Because what's the whole idea of this? That you get a grade? No. The idea is that you learn.
Mm.
And so that's largely why I do that.
It sounds like it generates a positive response from your students when you do that.
Most of the time, yeah. Yeah, it does.
Wonderful.
So
Well, good. How does your grading time frame look? How long do you try to shoot for returning grades to students?
if I can at all do it, I'll get it back within 2 or 3 days after they've turned it in. Right now, for example, I've got several things going on at once, and this semester I've got a lot of students who are finally. It's like Rip Van Winkle. They've just woken up, and it's 20 years later, and they're going, "Oh no, I got to get my assignments in." So all of a sudden, I've got people turning in 4 and 5 assignments at a time, which isn't ideal because I'll get them, but I can't. They can't really take advantage of me giving them the feedback to improve the next one. So that presents some problems. You just have to work around it. But that's where it really gets interesting when I open up Blackboard one morning and I'm going, oh, 27 assignments to grade here. It's no problem. We'll work through those. So
How do you
yeah,
tend to work with students during? Because I know that a lot of instructors have commented on like data dumping or assignment dumping. Like, how do you tend to work around that with the students to help them succeed?
um, I believe it or not, I will occasionally have a student who will send me an email with a little caveat about, I'm really sorry that I turned all of these in all at once, but here's what happened and why that ended up that way. And I'll give them the benefit of a doubt on that and not worry about it. But I'll just go through one at a time. There are patterns. A lot of the students have patterns in their work once they establish it, and but I do have students who will take advantage of the opportunity to revise. The problem is when we get to this time of the semester, it's like, how much time do I have to revise this? And I'll look at my calendar and say tomorrow. So that gets to be a little bit frightening for them when they realize that. But it, I'll try in my announcements to plead with people. Please don't wait until midnight on the whatever the last day of class is. Get your assignments in beforehand so I can actually have time to grade and get some feedback to you, because they won't really do you a lot of good if you're getting them all back in one lump and you can't do anything about them if you want to make some revisions. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, you have had really strong success rates in your class of students being able to persist through their studies, and you've had good scores. So we really appreciate you taking the time to kind of share your knowledge and experience with us today.
Glad to do it.